Take it away, Kevin.
Thanks, Nina. Thank you, everyone. Thanks for being here. It's great to be back for another AIM webinar, this time with our friends from Ripcord. We are here today to talk about ChatGPT and how it is transforming the information management landscape. Now, ChatGPT has over 100 million users as of this month, June 2023, and indeed, ChatGPT has set the record as the fastest growing consumer application in history. Since its release in November of last year, ChatGPT has been attracting headlines for its much hyped potential, owing to its chat box format, which opens up a dialogue between humans and AI. ChatGPT allows users to request information on highly specific topics. Look, everything from quantum computing to, say, the principles of flower arrangement and just about everything else you can think of in between. ChatGPT is known as a large language model tool, and it is trained in vast amounts of data and information, articles, textbooks, the internet, your own corporate data, and as a result can perform any number of complex activities with large amounts of data that are simply not possible using humans alone. And look, I think we all feel it at some level. We're at an important inflection point in technology history. Like when Google came on the scene. Remember Google, the first time you used Google? Or perhaps when the iPhone arrived. Remember the first iPhone? In just a few years, in my opinion, virtual assistants with AI will be as common as the iPhone and as familiar as Google. It's coming, whether we like it or not. So what does all this mean to information management? How can tools like ChatGPT be applied to our industry? And what are the advantages and implications that we should consider? Well, in this webinar, we're going to explore the power of large language models and generative AI, such as ChatGPT, and its impact on the world of information management. We'll examine the concepts behind these technologies and demonstrate the innovative capabilities of several AI-powered tools. With our guest expert from Ripcord, we'll learn the role of capabilities of large language models and generative AI in information management, how to use these tools to design information management solutions that matter. And we'll see some demos of these tools in action and the potential to transform information management practices. So get ready for another great informative webinar. But before I introduce our guest today, I want to say that we do want to hear from you too. We'd like to encourage everyone to participate. So if you have any questions for our guest today, please put them in the Q&A feature. That's where I'll be watching, and we'll have some time later on in the program today for your questions. All right, let's bring aboard our guest expert today, Jono Grubb. Jono, are you with us? Hello, Jono, are you with us?
Yes, I am. Thank you, Kevin.
Where are you calling in from, Jono?
I am in State College, Pennsylvania today.
Nice, Pennsylvania, very good. Welcome aboard. Now, Jono Grubb is the Vice President of Product Management for Ripcord. So, Jono, please tell us more about this power of large language models and generative AI and the potential impact to the world of information management.
Awesome. Yeah, will do. Excited to dive in. Yeah, really excited to discuss and show how the technologies behind ChatGPT are changing information management. I think ChatGPT is the big name that we all hear, but we get to see kind of what's happening behind the scenes and how that can be applied to really improve how we're doing our daily jobs. So today, the impact of information managers to provide access to documents and data is limited by time and budget. We have a lot of customers who come to us with very high value problems that they need to solve. And before they've gotten to us, they've already worked within their company to figure out the priority of which are the biggest information problems to solve and bring to us. That's all changing with these large language models and ChatGPT. We see a future where you'll have the ability to manage a much broader scope of information with a lot less time and money. So really just increasing the reach that these tools have. So the technologies behind ChatGPT and similar tools are already changing the ways we organize, access, recall, and work with information. We started with files and folders that led to us being able to search through curated data. And now we're even going to be just chatting and interacting with our data in a whole new way. So what we're going to do today is first, we're going to take a look at the tech behind ChatGPT and how it works. Then we're going to dive into these large language models and see how they can help with information management in a way that's both reliable and secure. Then we're going to get a quick demo of Ripcord's product, and you can see how we have implemented this. And then we're going to talk about the future and what it means for information managers. So first, AI. AI, I'm sure we've all heard that word many times, especially this year, but also, coming from the tech world in Silicon Valley, definitely been bombarded with AI for as long as I've been in the industry. And let's talk about what this means. So there's a lot of nuance, and these are very complex systems, but we're going to, for the purposes of what we're doing, we can keep it pretty simple. So AI for us is making machines act in a way that simulate human intelligence. And the evolutions in these technologies have played an important impact in the role of how we interact with content over time. So in the 2000s, we were using natural language processing to really start doing entity extraction, sentiment analysis, and summarization. Then with the 2010s, we saw large developments in both machine learning and deep learning. In these cases, we could take either large amounts of content, like let's say we wanted to make OCR generally better. We could take lots of images of letters and train models to be better at that, or we could tailor that to our customers and you all, where we can take very specific applications, train on that data, and then be able to extract useful information from new content coming down the pipe. Now in the 2020s, we're seeing huge advancements in generative AI, and really important to us is a specific subset of generative AI called large language models. And large language models are the primary technology behind ChatGPT. So what are these large language models? Like Kevin said in the introduction, these are models that are trained on huge amounts of data. Think tens of terabytes up to a petabyte of text data. That's just an enormous volume of data in all languages. And these models, each training run will cost millions of dollars. And during the training process, it's chewing on all of this text information from how humans interact and communicate with each other. And what you're left with is a model that can fundamentally understand language and how it's used by us. And at the end of the day, what it's doing is it's just predicting what the next word should be. So in this slide, you can see if you passed in 4 words to a large language model, the cat sat on. The large language model's job is to just guess or predict the next word. And so it might come up with 3 options it could give: the, a, or it. All 3 of those are very, reasonable next words in this sentence. And depending on its strategy, and that strategy can be configured, it'll choose one of those words. In information management, we'll probably be taking the highest, most likely word. But if you're in a much more creative space, like writing a poem or something, you probably you can change the parameters for it to be a lot more creative. So it's not just always the predictable next word. And so these large language models, there's a few things important things to note, just when we're looking at this really high level service understanding. First is that when you see the cat set on, this input we're referring to, or we think of as the context, and different models have different context sizes. So the OpenAI models behind ChatGPT generally range from a context size of 4,000 to 12,000 4,000 to 32,000 tokens. And a token for our purposes is close to a word, so you can think of that as somewhere in the, say, the order of like 3,000 to 25,000 words can fit in this model. And that's what we have room to provide a context and give it prompts so that it can provide an accurate next word that's really relevant to us. So now that we know a little more about these large language models and understand how they're next word predictors, let's give a quick demo of what they can do. So now we're going to jump over to OpenAI's website. So we're going to do a few demos today, including with ChatGPT, but we're going to start here with OpenAI's Playground. So their Playground is a space where you can just interact directly with the model, the large language model, whereas ChatGPT is an application that has some business logic between you and the model. So we'll give some demonstrations of both of these. But the first thing we want to demo is these two concepts of how you can use a large language model. One is a database where you can ask it a question and it's going to go deep into its model and predict the next words based off your question and come up with an answer and in that database form. And the second is a reasoning engine where it doesn't use information it already has. It uses its understanding of language to reason through something. So let's start with a question. What is George Washington's birthday? And this is a great example of how it can be used as a database. So it's going to, go predict some next words, and it's going to say George Washington was born on February 22nd. I don't know if this is right. It might be. But that's one of the things when it's acting as a database is it is possible to hallucinate, but oftentimes it does give really useful answers. But let's talk about this in the context of information management. Let's say I'm on the human resources team and George Washington is the name of one of my employees and I want to know their birthday. It's not super useful to get the first president's birthday when you want to know about one of your employees. So we can use this exact same model, but use it in such a way to turn it into a reasoning engine instead of a database. So first, we're going to use the system message over here on the left to give it some more clear instructions. Instead of just taking this question and giving the best response, we're now going to give a little more context about what we want it to do. So we're going to tell it it's an AI librarian, and its job is to answer questions based off documents that we provide. And we always want it to quote its source. So if we ask that same question again, what is George Washington's birthday? It's going to say, I'm sorry, I can't provide you information on that, which is great because now we can start to trust that it's going to only respond in the context of what's important to us, which is oftentimes our business documents. So let's add a document here. So I just had ChatGPT make up, this random employee document that has a bunch of random information about this employee, and we can submit that question again. All right, this is excellent. So now it's telling us, hey, your employee's birthday is November 18th, 1978. And here's the source we're going to cite based off that. And you'll notice we used date of birth, abbreviated DOB, and it was able to reason through what it's seeing to answer that question correctly. And one last thing before we move on, what if we change this from George Washington to Abraham Lincoln? Trust is really important, and we want to know that we are providing our customers with accurate information. And so even if we provide a document, it's going to find a birthday and see it, but it's going to recognize that this birthday belongs to George Washington, not Abraham Lincoln, and it's going to inform us that. So it's a really powerful concept, the difference between this reasoning engine and database, and both are really applicable to how we can use it. All right, so let's continue on. So these large language models, if you're keep a close eye on technology and products, are being deployed in a very wide range of applications. It feels like every week, dozens more are announced, and they can be used for just a wide range of use cases, anything from search to conversational AI, question answering, and sentiment analysis. So what are the possibilities for information management? The biggest thing and the thing we've been most excited about is this first bullet point is eliminating the heavy lift of implementation and onboarding. There's just so many use cases out there that are, not high enough priority, and they would cost too much and take too much time with the current tools. And so those use cases just are not served by the current tool set. By eliminating this heavy lift, the amount of content you can interact with is just going to grow so much. You enable work with the documents of many languages. We'll see some demos of this shortly. And then just the broad range of use cases and document challenges is really impressive. So let's get to some more demos. That's the fun stuff. We don't have too much time here today. So next up, we're going to show how this can be used with to help you organize data. And again, this can be used at a huge scale or even a small scale. So let's say we're looking at this text layer from a brochure. And when we OCR documents, oftentimes, the text, we can read the words, but it's not presented in a very useful format. So one use of ChatGPT is you can just ask it to clean it up for you. So if we ask, let me, this text is OCR from a document, please clean it up. And then we can just copy and paste a bunch of that text in. And ChatGPT is going to kind of do the hard work for you of going through and cleaning this all up. This can be used either as pre-processing steps, or if you just want to, do something or use the text as is for a different application. Another interesting use case that we found is, these tools, I think they can empower a long tail of use cases that you wouldn't even have considered before. So a few months ago, I was working with OpenAI, and they were asking me, okay, give me some forecasts on how many tokens per minute you're going to use. And so I went to their website, and I could see that they gave me a lot of the broken down information, but it wasn't in a great way for me to consume. I wanted to create graphs on this and do something useful with it. So normally, if it was a few hundred lines, I could have just sat there for 20 minutes, cranking away and putting that in a spreadsheet. But these kind of tasks, large language models are really good at. So if we just start a new chat, we can give it a quick prompt. So we're going to ask it to create a CSV format table with number of token, with the time, the number of tokens, the number of requests and the number of tokens. And then we'll just copy some of this data and paste it in. So you really can enable end users to take this into their own hands. This project I was doing definitely was not worthy of setting up a data pipeline and extracting everything correctly, but it is really useful for just being able to quickly ask some questions. Regenerate. All right, so here it's gonna, just pop that into a table. So it's useful for, let's say, up to 1,000 lines of data or whatever the current technology can support context-wise. But let's say you're a slightly more sophisticated user and you have, 100,000 lines of this data. That amount of content is too much to store in the context of the large language model. So we need a different approach. Now I have a technical background, but I don't write a lot of scripts. And so anytime I do any scripting, it used to take a long time to go figure out what was the right syntax and get everything set up correctly. But you can enable end users who are a little more technical with these technologies by just letting them ask ChatGPT questions. So instead of having it format everything for me, I could give it another prompt, say, write me a prompt, a Python script, take in this text and create a CSV instead. So now it's gonna generate me a Python script with all the logic needed in order to run this on a huge amount of data. And I can review this and say, okay, they literally put the input text as a blob in the script. Maybe I want it as an input. I could just ask ChatGPT, hey, instead of a variable, let me pass in a text file. And then I can get a nicely formatted CSV, then I can pop into Excel or do whatever I need to with. But the point is, this can really, it's a really powerful tool for being able to quickly enable you to do these smaller projects on the fly. All right, so let's jump back to the slides for a moment. So what are some limitations of generative AI? First is content length. Like we said, there's that context length. It's always evolving, but it is important to know that it can only take so much into memory at a time. The next is it's non-deterministic. This is a strength and a weakness. It's a strength because if it doesn't answer your question the way you like, you can always ask it again. There's also the possibility for hallucinations. So if you're interacting with, interacting with the LLM directly, it's important to be aware of these and be looking out for them and know how to prevent them. And then finally, availability and access to compute. You can even see in that last demonstration, ChatGPT took longer to respond and errored out in that second question I asked. And that's just because there's a huge demand for this resource right now. And that's not just ChatGPT, that's across all of the LLM providers. And also the last limitation to be aware of is the lack of explainability. If you ask it, it's often hard to know exactly why it chose the next word that it did. And that's an important factor to take in consideration. So when you're using this just in the smaller context or on kind of this long tail of problems, it's important to keep these in mind. But for product designers like us, this is like a critical part of the value chain that we add, is we deeply understand all of these and are adding a lot to our applications to really counteract them and make sure that we have a secure and reliable product. All right, I'm running a little tight on time, so we're going to speed this up a bit. Keeping your data secure. This is one of the most important questions we get from our customers. And I think one of the key things to note here is that, let me find it. There's been, as we transfer from ML and deep learning technology to these large language models, our customers are used to us taking their data, training on it, and then using that model to enrich their data. With large language models, there's this misconception that they often come to us with, is that we're going to need to do a similar process, but they're confused on how that works with this large language model and what it means for their data. At this point, many companies like ours, we're not doing any training on these large language models. We're just using exactly what OpenAI and others provide us. And so there is no training to worry about. And it's really important to read the terms of service, because this will change from provider to provider. But all the ones we use, it's very clear that the only things they can use our customer data for is abuse monitoring, and even that's limited to 30 days. So let's do a really quick demo of how we use this at scale in our product. Let me switch shares real quick. All right, so when we sat down and said, okay, a little context is Ripcord provides a number of services, and one of those is a SaaS document repository. And when we sat down and asked, where do we want to start with large language models? We thought through all the limitations and decided the best place to start would to be with summarization. So if we look at some of these examples, as you browse through Canopy, we're automatically going to summarize all of the documents that you come across. So you saw the text pop in below each one of these. In real time, we generated these summaries that we call abstracts. So as you browse through your content, if your file names aren't very meaningful, you can kind of quickly read through the abstract and get a sense of just what this document is about. And this is really helpful, especially through search. So you can see if we just search for something like Ripcord, we're going to get a bunch of documents, and we can quickly just browse through these different abstracts and see which one is most meaningful to us. It's also really cool on the translation side. So if we find a document such as this one that's in Arabic, I don't speak Arabic at all, but we can run a quick summarization and get a sense of what is in this document. It's a really powerful tool to really bridge the communication gap even across cultures. And what we're really excited for is today we are launching to our customers the ability to ask questions. So now to accompany that summarization feature, we can also find a document. There's this miscellaneous one I like about Bosch refrigerators. And I'm sure many people have purchased a refrigerator before. There's a lot of things you need to know about a fridge before you buy it. Maybe most importantly is, what is the cutout size? So now you can just ask this document, you can ask the question and it's going to tell us, hey, the cutout of this fridge is 72 inches by 36 by 25. Really helpful information. Likewise, you could ask it what kind of electrical. What kind of electrical plug does this use? And again, it's going to search through that document and just tell us it uses 120 volt 3-prong plug. These are really powerful tools to be able to use broadly across your corpus of documents. And these are the very first baby steps Ripcord is taking. We see huge potential for these technologies to really help you more fundamentally understand and give access to all of the content in your enterprise. All right, let's jump back to the slides. So just a couple last quick ones before we get to questions. So Ripcord, we're all about delivering document intelligence. And where do we go from here? So the ChatGPT has exploded and these technologies have changed so much in the last 6 to 8 months. What is coming next? We see large language models becoming a commodity. All of the huge infrastructure players like Microsoft, AWS, and Google, and Facebook, Meta are investing heavily in these. And so the large language models themselves are very likely to become a commodity, which is great for people like us and people building applications on top of them. They're just going to become less expensive and more accessible. And with that, and we're already seeing this, is generative AI is going to be embedded in almost every tool that you use in your daily work. There's just such a huge number of powerful applications. It's a no-brainer on that front. And finally, generative AI technology will disrupt your job within the next 2 years. That's a bold, exciting statement. We don't mean this as your job is going away. We mean this as your job is going to become much more impactful. There's so much more we can do with information management with these tools that really just everything becomes much more productive. What are some things we expect to change versus what do we think will remain constant? Like we said at the beginning, time to implement is going to drastically reduce. And that really comes down to this whole training, rollout, and adoption. It's just much simpler. And the scope of information becomes much broader. Since it's easier to implement these, that long tail of documents that weren't valuable enough to make the priority list before will now be reasonable to capture. And what's going to remain constant? Need for oversight, governance, and review. This part's going to stay critical. It's just going to be over a much larger data set. Specialized information or expertise and information tools, that's not going anywhere. And especially tied to this last bullet point, which is there's a lot of tasks that are done really well today. And there's no need to replace those with generative AI and large language models if they're working for you and doing everything you need. The first place is to really focus on is that long tail that's not being used. So how can you incorporate these tools? First, evaluate tools. The first thing you should look at is the privacy and security. Read through those privacy policies and make sure it works for your company. There's many tools that are really focusing on being secure and compliant, and there are many that are not. They're trying to grab your data. So it's good to read through the policy and understand what you're using. Next up, run pilot programs. In the past, we focused a lot on use cases. I'd encourage you to now look for, instead of use cases, look for users who often interact with documents but don't have any real strong tools to use. Though I think that's where a lot of this the power is coming. And then finally, stay up to date. Keep an eye on what tools are evolving. Every week there's new announcements and releases. And it's just all moving so quickly that it's great to stay on top of it and really bring that information into your company. And we'd love to hear from you. So there's a contact slide. You can look this up at the end. And if you have any questions, you can email myself, jonathan@ripcord.com, or our marketing team.
Very good. Thank you, Jono. That is Jono Grubb, Vice President of Product Management for Ripcord. Jono, thank you so much for your presentation today. Want to get to some questions from our audience. So if you have some questions for Jono, now would be the time to enter them into the Q&A feature. Now, Jono, before we get to audience questions, I have one for you, and it has to do with specific use cases for information management. You mentioned a number of powerful applications, eliminating the heavy lifting. Can you give us a clue on how these tools and LLMs can be used in information management, specifically to alleviate some of the heavy lifting in things like document classification and archive, maybe customer onboarding, contract management, the kinds of applications that we're used to managing quite heavily in the information management space? What are some of those applications that we can consider today?
Yeah, so a great question. And I'll start by saying, again, the main thing we want to focus on is with this paradigm shift is users, not applications specifically. Because if we get these tools in the right users' hands, they're going to be able to come up with applications and use cases that we never even thought of. Like, I don't think, as a product team, we wouldn't have sat there thinking, oh man, I bet Jono's going to go copy and paste some content from a website and have it organized for me. Those kind of tools are just like really powerful for users to grab on. And we've kind of started looking through our customers and thinking through those of what's not being served well today. And we see a lot in the spaces of mergers and acquisitions. There are a lot of really high value documents, or a small volume of high value documents that are those types of users interact with daily, that they don't have great tools or processes beyond just like Control F in Adobe. So getting those kind of use cases, we really see could empower the merger and acquisition use case. And also we have up here Danya, who leads our marketing team, to help chime in on some of these questions.
Sure. I think in terms of contract management, there's a huge opportunity to be able to very quickly pinpoint clauses or specific details in a contract, both to refer back to past contracts or to create new contracts based on existing data. Huge opportunities within employee records based on the example Jono showed. I think there's also lots of examples in any research intensive field where you're managing documents, be it for clinical research or research in the energy space. We've also seen a lot of opportunities with claims and policies and managing those within the insurance space. So there's lots and lots of broad applications across industries and across business functions.
All right, very good. Great. Well, let's get to some of our audience questions. We have questions coming in. I'm going to try to get to as many of them as I can. This one's starting from Sandra Gray. Sandra, thank you for your question today. And she's asking, if you are typing or asking questions with a voice command, how specific will the speech or spelling need to be? For example, capital letters or the use of quotation marks and so forth.
So that's all going to depend on the use case, and it is very flexible. All of the demonstrations I gave today, I'm not an expert prompt engineer, and we have those people at our company, but all the prompts I went through for those use cases where you're just trying to get yourself unstuck, you can ask it in very informal language in a lot of different ways, and it's oftentimes going to give a very useful answer. Where prompt engineering and being very specific about your words comes into play is when you're developing products that are going to serve a wide range of users. But for individuals using these tools, it's really easy just to experiment. And if one way of wording something doesn't work, you can just try a different way. But more often than not, that it doesn't take too much experimenting.
All right, very good, very good. All right, next question coming up here. This one coming in from Mark. Mark is asking, are you using any open source LLMs?
We are not at this time. So it's something we're interested in, but OpenAI and Azure just make it so easy on the hosting side that we can just pay a few pennies and use their LLMs. For now, we're trying to pick our battles, and we're just going to use what works, and that is currently working for us. Okay. In the next year or two, as we scale this and get it in the hands of more users, open source could definitely be the way to go. And we've seen a lot of announcement or internal communications from Google and others that open source may be the way to go in the long run.
This related question coming in from Jed. Jed asks, why would I trust the OpenAI or Microsoft Azure version models rather than using available open source tools to build my own LLM based on my corpus of content?
Yeah, so the reason to trust those tools is, one, they have very straightforward privacy policies, and we're going to trust that they're sticking to those. And with those privacy policies, it's going to work for the vast majority of users. Now, training your own versus using one of these ones that are hosted, that really comes down to this database versus reasoning engine approach that we discussed at the beginning. So if you train your own, it's very hard to know, is the information you're asking it coming from the information you trained it on, or is it coming from something else like George Washington, the historical figure? And the thing with large language models is that they're typically going to give you very confident answers, whether they're right or wrong. So the idea of taking all of your content and training it on and training an LLM specifically with that, there's a lot of technology to work out to make sure that that's robust and trustworthy. And with that technology we have access to today, we don't think that's the best way to go. Now, this is quickly changing, and maybe at the end of the year or in 2 years, we'll have a different point of view on that. But for us today, what we think is the most valuable thing we can offer to our customers is taking their content and providing it in these snippets to the large language models to use those as the reasoning engine to then help give useful answers.
Okay. Is it true that anything you put into ChatGPT becomes owned by them?
That is not true. So depending on a few things. So you can read through the privacy policies of ChatGPT. And when we look at ChatGPT, the application, there are different settings that application has to tell them, yes, you can use my data for training, or no, you can't. But it's really important to separate out ChatGPT, the application, from the OpenAI large language models. And those large language models, you can set the correct policies so that they do not own your data. And again, when looking at applications, it's a little different. If you look at Ripcord, we don't take ownership of your data. If you look at another tool, I don't remember the specific privacy policies, but if you look at ChatPDF and other tools that are out there, some of them are very clear. Anything you upload, we own, we have rights to, and we can sell it. So it's just really important to read those terms and understand what you're using. But if you're interacting with the base large language models through one of these large vendors, chances are that they're not owning your data.
Are there any AI tools that can be used to structure, clean up, apply retention and disposal methods and archive information?
Not commercially on the market today, but Ripcord and many others are like urgently trying to get that technology in your hands. So you can use large language models to build it yourself, but we're hoping to take that heavy lifting off for you and provide those tools embedded within our products.
All right.
And that is one tricky part we've seen in the last 6 months is we're used to the world in the last decade where Apple would announce something and then you'd be able to use it the next week. In the last 6 months, we see announcement after announcement after announcement of tools that sound awesome, but there's no date in which you can use those.
Okay.
So it's kind of tricky to figure this out. But please keep a close eye on companies like ours because we're trying to be very accurate of when you will have these tools in your hand. And as of today, we have those abilities to chat and summarize documents.
All right, we are here with Jono Grubb, Vice President of Product Management for Ripcord. In the time remaining, Jonathan, you mentioned just in passing the idea of hallucinations. And I've read about hallucinations. I'm not certain I understand exactly what they are and what we should be looking for and what the implications are. Briefly, can you tell us a little bit more about what hallucinations are and what we should be looking for in terms of our work today and the possibility of having hallucinations with our responses?
Yeah, so a hallucination is when one of these large language models gives you some information that is incorrect. And oftentimes it's very difficult it always presents a very confident front. So it's hard to tell, like we saw at the beginning, I don't know if that was George Washington's birthday. It told me very confidently it may or may not have been. And if it wasn't his birthday, that would be considered a hallucination. And so when looking at these tools, it's really important to keep a few things in mind. One, if you're using like ChatGPT or large language models directly, just be aware that they can make mistakes. If we ask it questions, be sure to like read through it, think critically, and decide for yourself if that's a trustworthy answer or not. Usually you can spot those things, and it takes less time to verify something rather than coming up with it on your own oftentimes. In products like Ripcords, we're really putting a heavy emphasis on giving you tools so that you can immediately make that determination. We're going to be releasing soon the ability to cite all sources based off questions asked. So I think it's interesting that we can provide you an answer to any question you ask, such as what is the cutout size of the refrigerator. But it's even more powerful to give you that insight along with a small snippet of the document showing exactly from where that came from. So you can just immediately know that you can trust it rather than having a second guess.
Is there a way that I can have a completely on-premise version of Ripcord?
We have some customers doing that. It's a lot more to manage, so it's a lot more expensive, but it is possible. We prefer to stick to the SaaS offering.
All right, very good. All right, very good. Another great session, this time with Jono Grubb, Vice President of Product Management for Ripcord. Jono, thank you so much for being with us today.
Thank you, really appreciate your time.
All right, everyone, I'd like to send it back over to Nina now to close us out. Now, Nina, what's going on? Tell us more.
Sorry about that. Well, now that we are in the age of AI, just to announce, AIM is showcasing a mega webinar on artificial intelligence, as it has been around for some time, yet it often feels like, you know, people say that's not what they're needed, it's an IT issue, but that's not the case anymore. In the last few months, generative AI has exploded thanks to the launch of ChatGPT. So join us on July 26th with a lineup of industry experts as we discuss and explore the impact AI has and will continue to have on information management. Remember, you don't need to worry about what AI is, but you do need to understand what it does and what it can do. So click the link in the registration in the chat today to register. And as we are bringing the webinar to a close, a few last minute reminders. We've recorded this webinar, so you can catch anything you want to hear again in a recap email that will be sent within 24 hours. A link to the resources for this webinar is put in the chat. You'll find a copy of this presentation as well as additional resources through that link. And don't forget to take our feedback survey and let us know how we did. Again, a big thank you to our sponsor, Ripcord, for a wonderful, informative webinar. And before we go, I wanted to ask Jono if he had any last minute key takeaways for our audience.
Oh, great question. I think, just this is all moving so fast and it's so exciting. So it's great to attend events like this and just keep a pulse on what's changing. Because at this point, we don't know what's going to be announced next month.
Absolutely. What about you, Kevin?
Well, I agree with Jono. These sessions that we're having here recently, Nina, are important because we're covering new ground and covering new territory that we are yet to explore. We are at an important inflection point in technology history. Virtual assistants, ChatGPT, AI-assisted applications will be as common as an iPhone here, just whether we like it or not. I'm looking forward to the mega webinar on using AI in information management that's coming up. And I hope that everybody attends that one because that'll be a great session. But today has been fantastic as well. And I want to thank Jono and Ripcord for being a part of it.
Absolutely. Thanks again for joining us today, everyone. This is Nina from AIM saying, see you next time.